The Metaphysician's Companion.
Good morning, John.
Good morning, Graham.
I'm back from Tasmania, which was beautiful. The weather was great, so that's nice. And I'm sorry we may have a delay getting the last podcasts up. And I think last time we talked about our real self and what that was. And this time, I think we can talk about the difference between men and women.
How the real self
acts out the part in these two
social
circumstances and sexes. Because I think this is really interesting, because in conversations I've been having lately with a lady in Sweden, actually, about this, it's that allowed me to think about it and focus on it. And when we were discussing it earlier on, I thought, yes, this is a good discussion to have. What makes the difference between a man and a woman in this world, in the sense. So where shall we start?
Well, I think when you mentioned it to me first off, the thing you were saying is, why is it that women tend to be way more interested in the spiritual matters than men are?
Yeah, because I've noticed on the stats from the podcast that this is the case, and there's a certain ages too that interact more than others. So the ages between 45 and say 60 are probably our greatest audience, and they're mainly, in fact, they're all women, which is interesting. Yeah, we do have men who do listen to this podcast, I might add.
Yeah, the age thing isn't so unusual. Like, I think the fundamental issue is about engaging with the world, the physical world, and how we go about doing it.
Because men are brought up in a way that they have to be the provider. I mean, this is the old school version, but it's still there. Be the provider and the one that cares for the family. I think that's the right word.
Well, I think men are active in the world, and women are at home as caregivers.
Yeah.
Many years ago, a friend who went to a Catholic girls' school said, a nun said, men provide the bread, that women put jam on it. And what it's saying is that men are active outside of the home, and women are in the house taking care of things. I
know this is changing, because we can see is changing in society at the moment. So anybody listening will say, it's not true. But if one looks at, say, old movies, one can see this a lot. You can see that the man is out there working in the field, or he's working and he's digging the road, or whatever he's doing. But he's the main character, especially. And we're not going back that far. We're only going back to the 1950s and 1960s, and maybe a bit after that. And it starts to shift more, where the man is more involved in the family situation, like places like Norway, for example. The maternity leave for both parents is just the same, and the adult looks after the child. So there is a shift away from this normal thinking. I think that's the right word, but it still doesn't change the effect of one's upbringing and how one's brought up and how one's brought up to think about it.
It might be clearer to see, like if you look at some of the traditional societies, which have men's roles and women's roles are more formally implemented. And I remember a guy I knew years ago was a patrol officer in New Guinea when it was still an Australian territory. And he was talking about one place he was where the women basically did all the work and the men sat around doing nothing. And what do you say? He used coercion, to get the men to do what they considered women's work, which was building a shed or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the women's work lacked value, but the men didn't want to do it because it was the women. It was something that was traditionally done by women, and the women wouldn't like it if they saw the men doing women's work.
And I think also various religious faiths reinforce this model.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is the other thing. And the question I really got asked was, why are more women interested in spirituality, and I use the word spirituality rather than religion and metaphysics, than men are? And I think what we need to do now is sort of like perhaps describe a man's life and how he works in the world at this time. And I think we can only talk from the Western world we live in. And then sort of talk about how the women's role is, or perceived as. Would you agree with that type of...
Well, whereas I do agree with it, I would start from a different position.
Oh, right. Let's have all yours.
And that is, like, we're talking about, a spiritual matter here, which is, like I said, I come into this world, and for me, it is an intention to life. And as I grow up, I look at what's around me, and I take on a role in this world. I am playing a role, and that role happens to be the role of a man.
And that role is reinforced by your upbringing with your family.
Exactly, and this is the bit where I do agree with you.
Yeah. And then it's reinforced if you're in a religious background, like you're Catholic or you're Protestant or you're Jewish or you're Muslim or whatever. That's reinforced in that.
Some of it is explicitly directed.
Yeah.
And some of it is implicit. It's just not spoken of. It's just done because people copied it from their parents and so forth. That the issue, again, that that's a spiritual thing, is that do I act primarily from that intention to life that I'm talking about, or do I act as if my role is real, the only thing that is real?
And I would say that most men, certainly in the Western world, would believe that their role is real.
Yeah. That's the point. This is the point where I think it comes into.
Yeah.
And whereas the women are, like the whole idea with childbirth and that, and then in a traditional sense, they are more associated directly with life itself. And I think that the roles that they play actually enables them to more easily contact the reality within. It's not that women do not get caught up in playing a role of mother and wife or whatever it is. They do.
Or a role before they're a mother and wife, because I've seen that too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they've got that role, then they become the mother and wife and play that role. But that role in its own sense can lead perhaps to a more exposed version, a more exposed life to what's outside this life.
Yeah. I think, I'm hunting for an idea here that is, where was it? The women's roles tend to be more closely related to the basic realities of this world.
Yeah.
Even if it's, and I'm talking traditional societies here, and I'm certainly not saying this is the right way or etc. But, food, eating, looking after children, just the basic realities. Whereas the men's roles can become, quite detached from the fundamental realities, like going into an office and working on a computer. You see what I mean? It's about, it's all in the head.
Yeah.
Or in business and finance, counting money, this kind of stuff. Like I say, it's not that women can't do this, and they do it and do it very well, but it's that the social roles ask, depending on your, what's the right word these days, gender or sexual, whatever it is, that they are asked to become more engaged in the activity, the actual doing of things in the world, rather than being present.
So you're talking the man here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're out there doing things. So like the digging of the road and hanging the jackhammer.
Or like I say, or the counting of money.
So if they're qualified as men's work, whatever. And
it tends to be more intellectual and detached from the actual physical being of being a human. Yeah, that's the thing.
I've lost you there. Just explain again.
It is what it is that what am I? When I say I, what am I talking about? And I talk about that intention to life that I feel within.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people who are caught up in the role will talk about their role.
So they're talking about their as people say, work is my life.
Yeah, it might be I am a bank manager.
Yeah.
Or even worse, is that I own a Rolls Royce.
Yes.
I define who I am by what I own, or do I define who I am by what I do, or do I find who I am by just being present here now?
Being who you are inwardly rather than outwardly. So men tend less to go into themselves to find out who they really are. I think that's probably the crux of the whole thing in the end.
Well, I say it as they become more engaged in the role they are playing.
Okay, so the inward man or inward spirit of that man is not allowed to develop.
Yeah, in some ways it's like, that ancient Chinese guy, I can't remember.
Ancient Chinese guy, I can't remember.
Yeah, some bloke, famous, and of course what he says must be preserved for all time. It's a bloke. But,
Confucius.
How about we just go back to Shakespeare? The whole world's a stage and we are but players on it.
Yeah, man, I actually agree with that, actually.
Yeah, and some people become more engaged with the role that they are playing than the fact that they are an actor on this stage of life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why is it that women, perhaps, for example, if you look at the so-called occult world, or what you call it, or New Age spirituality, when you look at, say, psychics, probably 80% are women. When you look at healing modalities which are non-physical and non-medical, again it's 80%, at least women. So there must be something in the woman that triggers them to start to go down that path more than the man. So what do you think that is?
I don't know, but I was casting my mind back to the late Stone Age, the Bronze Age. Now, even up until the Bronze Age of development, the goddess was the primary mythological figure.
Yeah.
That the woman's role in bringing life into this world was the most significant aspect. You had your men, the hunt, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of the mythology that drove the societies, it was matriarchal.
Well, there's a book, an old book, called The Mists of Avalon. Do you remember reading about the book? You've got it on the shelf there. Which is all about women being in control, really, isn't it? Because they give us to the men, basically, and the men come to them for the favours. Well, we may think they may be.
This is breaking aside for a bit of social development. Ireland is curious in its mythology because you see the powerful women, stories of powerful women coming from in an Iron Age setting.
Yes.
And the Iron Age is where the patriarchy started to, men started to become in control. So you have that Mists of Avalon is still pointing back to the goddess.
Yeah.
It's a different social structure.
So it's which has got lost, for whatever word, or moved through whatever.
Yeah. Societies change and develop.
Develop, whatever, yeah.
And social conditions, like we evolve, and evolution is a response to environmental changes. It's not goal-oriented.
It's okay.
So something happened that made it what do you say, survival was enhanced by men taking up over control. Doesn't mean it's better. It just happened to be that way.
So do you think there's any way, say, more men could start to perhaps open up their consciousness to the inner spirit, for another word, or inner being?
One of the reasons that I have, for recommending a more, what we call a spiritual pathway, is well-being. When any person is too engaged in the role, they are detached from themselves, and I think this is where we get anxiety and depression and emotions of this sort come into play, because they are detached from this feeling of being alive.
And basically, social media re-enhances all that thing about the outward world being right rather than inward world.
Yeah. Retail therapy. You heard that expression?
Of course.
I feel bad, so I'll go and buy something. No, that's sort of, it's like an addiction, like a giving over yourself to...
I think women are more likely to try and find out why they feel that way rather than men.
To deal with the feeling directly.
Yeah. And isn't that, again, about something to do with genetics as well, in the sense that men tend to be less... what's the word I'm looking for? When they get a physical problem, for example, they tend to put it aside and saying, I'm the man, I'm strong about it, rather than try and go inward to say, okay, what has caused this? Now, we can move to a whole new subject here, because basically it's my understanding from a lot of my work I've done that a lot of the illness is caused by emotional stress that's been buried in one form or another.
I think the way I understand that one is independence. As a man, I am supposed to be independent, self-sufficient, whatever. You see it in like the movies. These are the movies of the 50s and 60s, like John Wayne. Could you imagine that character sitting down and having a chat with his mates? Like, I'm feeling a bit iffy about going out and doing this thing.
I'm feeling a bit iffy about bringing out the 6-shooter and shooting a few people today.
A man's got to do what a man's got to do. But you see what I mean? It's independent self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Whereas, that's, again, we're talking about social constructs. I really want to make that clear, not about the worthiness of a person.
No, but what we're trying to say is really social constructs that has limited the man to open up to his spirituality, really.
Yeah, and that social construct of being independent and self-sufficient actually means that you have to mask the inner self. It really does, Whereas I think the true strength comes in being able to show that openly, to show myself, I am here in this place. That's it. And if sometimes I have the strength to do the things, and other times I need help. And that going, I need help. That's the bit I think that really comes into play.
And that's another thing I noticed. People talk about it, that men are more reluctant to ask for help than men.
I know I am.
I'm not. That's if I'm unsure about something, I try and seek some way of finding out about how to get over that particular problem I might be having. But I also notice with women too, they tend to be more. Not all women, but a higher proportion of women tend to be more open to looking for other alternative ways of bettering themselves, in the sense of understanding who they are and why and what. And when you think about it, that the conversation I've been having with a lady in Sweden is about that. I'm looking for this. I'm trying to find it. Now, how many men would do that?
Yeah. Well, I would call that less rigid.
Yeah.
And say if a person, and I mean that, is committed to their social role, they will have lost contact with their true self. But if you are, I look out and I think in terms of that, this is an old Japanese one. Before enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. After enlightenment, carry water, chop wood. Yeah, meaning we do live in a physical world, and it's how we feel about it that's the really important aspect. And that's that difference. If I'm stuck in my role, I'm concerned with what's outside, the carrying the water and the chopping wood, not how I feel while I'm doing it.
And how I feel towards other people, maybe even that would be consideration.
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
It's like, do I see another man as a competitor? And if I'm stuck in the self-sufficiency role, to a certain extent, that has to be the way.
Or do I see the man as another human being as on a journey?
Yeah, and this is the more spiritual aspect, the thing that says, hey, we are all human. At a fundamental level, we are all the same.
Which gets to that point where we're all basically equal. We just have these pretense that we're not.
Yeah. And again, that pretense is the role, the game we're playing.
Yeah, it's the role that gives that pretense.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, John, do you think we've covered that one?
I reckon we've gone over that one, mate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'd love to get comments from people on this, because I think it's such a big subject.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's a thing that you can build on from once you have that. What's the word? No, knowing's not the right word. Once you realise that's what you... So, for example, as a man, if you realise that's what you're doing, once you have that realisation, then you can say, okay, well, where else can I go? Do I just live in this outward world, or do I start to look inwardly into myself? Or will I look at myself and go, oh, shit,
yeah,
this is who I really am?
Yes, well, see, this is what happened to me back in the LSD days.
Oh, yeah.
What is this all about?
Yeah.
This whole world.
Okay. Well, we should finish on that note.
I think so. I think that's a good
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. It was good fun. All right. So if you want to make a comment, please do so. You can either leave it on the Spotify app and leave a comment. We are slowly getting our podcast on other platforms, yes, but it does take time, unfortunately. But if you also have a query and want to email us, please do. John, please.
It's metphyscompanion@gmail.com. That's METPHYS companion, all one word. Sorry, try that again. @gmail.com.
Anyway, we'll leave it for there, and hopefully next week we'll have something more exciting.
Yep.
All right.
Catch you then.
Okay, bye-bye for now.